Hi everyone, I am Jessica Holtein. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. On behalf of our CEO, Susan Abrams, our Board of Directors, volunteers, and staff, I would like to thank you for being here for this very special commemorative program, Memory in the Face of Denial, Srebrenica 25 years later. As an institution grounded in the history and lessons of the Holocaust, that works to share universal lessons of humanity and generate awareness and action against injustices worldwide, it is a pleasure to share this commemorative program with you. This afternoon, we look to address the final stage of genocide, denial. It is actually a continuation of genocide because it is an attempt to destroy victim groups psychologically and culturally, to deny its members even the memory of the murders of their relatives. Denial is an assault meant to destroy truth and understanding. It is our job to resist this hateful rhetoric of denial and always remember the past and transform the future. Just being here today and recognizing the genocide in Srebrenica is fighting the denial taking place in the town of Srebrenica itself in Bosnia-Herzegovina today. Today, we will hear from survivors of the genocide in Srebrenica and both a journalist and photojournalist who were on the ground and witnessed the atrocities taking place around the country. Their incredible stories serve as further testimony in the work to combat denial, and the reality and power of their words we must remember to teach future generations. It is an honor to stand with you and alongside you today as we come together to acknowledge the genocide at Srebrenica as well as genocides worldwide. Only as a collective community can we impart truth and confront the discourse of genocide denial through memory and education. I would like to thank our community partners listed on our opening slides for their continuing support. It is now my honor and distinct pleasure to introduce today's moderators. Ida Sefer, the president of the Board of Directors for the Bosnian American Genocide Institute and Education Center, and Dr. David Pettigrew, professor of philosophy and Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Southern Connecticut State University. He also is the secretary of Board of Directors for the Bosnian American Genocide Institute and Education Center. Thank you, Ida and David.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to the entire education team at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center for giving us the space to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. Thank you also to the Educators Institute for Human Rights for serving as a community partner. Alongside with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center, we've worked many years together to create educational programming and to honor the survivors and victims of the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So thank you again for giving us the physical space when we had it pre-COVID, and also your platform to educate others about this important topic today. We've gathered here today to be vulnerable, most importantly, to learn and to remember a very painful time in Bosnia's history. As we move from speaker to speaker today, I want us to remember that when we speak about the numbers of victims, when we imagine these victims, and that the numbers are pretty tragic, 8,372 people, specifically in Srebrenica, we are not just noting the numbers. Each person was a person, a human, with dreams, with aspirations and hope for the future. They were parents, siblings, cousins, and neighbors. And when we reflect on those numbers, we have to remember that entire families were uprooted during this genocide. Entire family lineages were eliminated. Their names and lives deserve to be honored, so let's please take a moment of silence to hold space for that mourning. And now we will move on for Dr. David Pettigrew. He will introduce our two speakers from the Srebrenica Memorial Center. David.
Thank you, Jessica and Ida. It's an honor to introduce my friends Hassan, Asanovich and Ahmad from the Srebrenica Memorial Center. The Srebrenica Memorial Center was established by 4 executive decisions that were taken by 3 successive high representatives over the course of 8 years, beginning in 2000. The center includes a cemetery where 8,372 victims are still being buried as their human remains are recovered from mass graves and identified. And the grounds and buildings of the former battery factory on the other side of the road where memorial spaces and offices are maintained. In 2017, the first comprehensive educational museum devoted to the Srebrenica genocide was installed at the Memorial Center in the space at the headquarters of the UN Dutch Battalion that had been assigned to protect the UN designated safe area established by the Security Council Resolution 819, 16 April 1993. And that is the solemn space where Hassan and Ahmad have dedicated themselves to preserving the memory of the victims and educating the public about the truth about the genocide. Hassan survived the genocide, but other family members did not, including his twin brother and his father. For many years, he has educated thousands of visitors each year at the Srebrenica Memorial Center. He is currently curator and interpreter at the center. He is interviewed by the international press and has been a keynote speaker at events in universities and schools around the world. He is a permanent member of the Peace March organization committee established to mark the annual anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. And he has addressed the Scottish House of Parliament and Flemish House of Parliament. With the support of the Scottish First Minister, he published a short memoir of his experience entitled Surviving Srebrenica, which has been translated into Italian, Flemish, and German. And he is co-author with Anne Petrilla of Voices from Srebrenica, a survivor account of the Bosnian genocide. So he's been working on these projects regarding Srebrenica genocide to ensure that it will not be forgotten. Asanovich has been working at the Srebrenica Memorial Center since 2005. She holds the position of head of General Legal Economic Affairs and Museum Service. She has a degree in criminal studies and a bachelor's of law. She's the mother of 2, and she's tied personally through her work at the center due to the devastation of her own family. She lost 26 relatives in 1995, and among those were her father and grandfather.
Hello everyone, I'm Amra Bejević from the Srebrenica Memorial Center. I would like to thank you for having me and my colleague Hassan to talk about Srebrenica genocide and Memorial Center as the institution under the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but as the place, memorial place for the genocide victims from 1995. Anyway, it is really hard to talk in this moment, and especially when we know that we have just about 10 minutes to explain what we are doing in here now and why it is important to keep doing this and what we are planning for the future of the Memorial Center. But anyway, Srebrenica Memorial in this moment, we are preparing marking of the 25th anniversary of the genocide. And also in this, in the last period, we are working on the Srebrenica genocide denial. So as a family member of the genocide victims, as a mother of 2 who are living in Srebrenica today, as someone who works in the Memorial Center, it is really very important to say that this what you are doing is very important for us, especially in the last period since genocide denial started to be even more loud here in Srebrenica, and it is strange that the mostly and the most loud denial is happening at the territory where genocide actually started. Anyway, when I said that I'm a mother of 2, and probably you can't find that connection in between this, what we are doing here now, and people who are living in Srebrenica today. But it is connected, you know, because our kids in Srebrenica, they are looking every day, like posters. The last poster a few days ago in Srebrenica came as a shock for all of us. Some organization, the name is not important, but they made posters, they put that on the streets in Srebrenica, where it is written, let's celebrate July 11th. On July 11th this year, let's celebrate and let's thank to the Bosnian Serbs military forces for making Srebrenica free, or however. So they were inviting them for party in some way, to celebrate a genocide, you know. So it is very important to fight against this with the facts, with the stories of the survivors, with artifacts, actually personal belongings of the genocide victims. And it is very important to spread the truth about Srebrenica all over the world. That is why I said that it is important, this one, for us, this what you did at the Chicago Holocaust Museum for the 25th anniversary. Anyway, behind me you can see the whole, actually this is going to be one of the parts that we are going to use for the commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide in a few days. Anyway, we are going to have exhibitions in here. Also, we are going to have commemoration that we all hope that you will also follow at the United States. And we are going to prepare the exhibition by the stories of the survivors, family members of the genocide victims, but also that they will tell the story about the genocide victims itself. Anyway, my colleague Hassan is going to tell you much more about everything that we are doing in here, and we hope I hope that you will be able to understand even much better why it is more important now that it was maybe 20 years ago to go on with this, what you are doing and what we are doing here in Srebrenica. So thank you once more.
Hello everyone, my name is Hassan Asanovich. I'm the curator of the Srebrenica Genocide Memorial. It's been 11 years since I've been here educating people about the story of Srebrenica genocide. I am a survivor myself. I lost my father, my twin brother, my uncle, who are buried at our cemetery in Memorial here in Potocari, near Srebrenica. This is the main reason why I'm actually here, why I'm working for this memorial. I grew up in a small village outside of Srebrenica where I had a very happy childhood. Not much time passed, the war started, and I had to run. I had to run with my family to Srebrenica. I ended up in Srebrenica, spent over 3.5 years living under the siege with no food, no water, nothing. I did not go to school for 2 years. It was very difficult to live there. In 1993, we were proclaimed as safe area by the UN Security Council. The United Nations came. We thought that was the end of the Bosnian, that was the end of war in Srebrenica. Sadly, that was not the case. In July 1995, the Bosnian Serb army attacked Srebrenica again, in spite of the UN presence. And we all had to run. Women and children ran to Potocari. My mother, my younger brother, my grandparents from mother's side, her parents ran to Potocari. All of them thought that they would be saved and protected here by the United Nations, by the Dutch battalion. Men and boys ran through the forests. We called this Death March. And that was my journey. Me, my father, my twin brother, my uncle, we all started this track through the woods to the west, over 60 miles towards the territory under control of the official Bosnian government. we were hoping that we would reach the free territory and reunite with our families. Not much time passed, and I lost the sight of my twin brother, my father, and my uncle, and I never saw them ever again. I spent 6 days and 6 nights running through the forests. I was literally being hunted. On daily basis, I was shot at. They were shelling the forest through which we were walking on daily basis. I had no food, I did not sleep. Many nights, the lack of sleep was killing me. And I was thin, I was 19-year-old. I was hoping to survive. I was very, very scared. I did not sleep for 6 nights. Eventually, on July 16th, 1995, I managed to get to the free territory with the other survivors. And I could not believe what I survived. I was hoping that my father, my twin brother, and my uncle would make it as well. And later, after a couple of weeks, I managed to reunite with a part of my family. I found my mother, younger brother, and my grandparents at Tuzla Airport, where most of the refugees were. And later, not much later, started to go to school again. And many, many years passed before I found out what happened to my father, my twin brother, and my uncle. I started going to the university. I was an interpreter as well. And in 2003, I buried my father, and I came here to Bratunac. Local Serb police stopped us. We came in a convoy of buses, and Bill Clinton was inaugurating the memorial that day, and this is why the Serb police told us that there was a traffic jam. As we got off those buses, there were many local Serbs in the streets. As we were walking, there was a long line of police officers to stop physical contact between them and us. So as I was walking, going to bury my father, from that crowd, local Serbs were yelling out unbelievable insults, calling us animals, Turks, spitting on us. So as I was walking, even war criminals from that crowd were spitting on me. So can you imagine that? I just wanted to bury my father in dignity, and they wouldn't and didn't let me. 2 years later, I buried my twin brother, which was the most difficult day in my life. I thought, honestly, that I wouldn't survive that burial. I had to put his bones with my bare hands, and I buried him that day. And these 2 burials hit me that hard that actually have changed my life forever. Ever since, every day, every moment of my life is about their story. And this is why I returned here to work for the memorial, to contribute to the education about the genocide. And it's been 11 years since I've been doing that. I'm also trying to travel abroad to speak in schools and in universities to try to raise awareness. I also try to do some writings as well. So it's been 25 years since the genocide, and this year we are marking our anniversary, 25th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide. And it's very important that we remember again and commit that we will never ever again, that we will never forget. Memorial Center has started many projects to document this genocide, and we will never allow this genocide to be forgotten. We will do our best to provide facilities and resources here at the memorial to educate people, not just from Bosnia, but globally, to make sure that the genocide which happened here in July 1995 never happens again. Thank you so much.
So I would like to thank Hassan and Amra for joining us today, for their participation. On a personal note, I'd like to say that Amra and Hassan have been so supportive of students and journalists that I've brought to the Memorial Center over the years. Just last June, Hassan welcomed Ida and I and a group from our International Women's Conference in Sarajevo. And in addition to guiding student groups, Amra has always welcomed me to her office for a cup of coffee when I'm visiting on my own. So my thanks to both for everything they do and for joining us today. Now, I'm going to introduce the work of Azir Osmanovic, who's also at the Memorial Center. He's a genocide survivor who also lost many members of his extended family. He does many things at the Memorial Center. I feel like he does everything, and he's helped me with my research in many ways over the years. And now he has also published a book, From Srebrenica to the Light at the End of the Tunnel, a story of the suffering of his own family and other families from the Podrinja. Now he's leading a team at the Memorial Center that is collecting personal belongings of genocide victims, work that includes finding items that were left by victims along the route of the death march. So they've been working to collect the items for preservation and exhibition at the Memorial Center so victims will not be forgotten. After we talked about this new project, he offered to create this video for our commemoration today that I will play now. I'd like to thank Azir for sharing his important work with us today. And just before Ida introduces our next speaker, Sonata Pargan, I wanted to mention that today, July 9th, is a day when the coffins with the human remains of the victims who've been exhumed from mass graves and identified for burial arrive in Potocari for safekeeping in a warehouse in preparation for the funeral and collective burial on July 11th. So today we remember the victims. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's so difficult to watch that without getting choked up. I definitely want to provide some space for folks to just catch their breath after seeing that. I'm honored to be able to introduce our next guest. Sonata is a dear friend of mine. Sonata Pargan is an author and an activist who was born in Srebrenica in 1975. She's a survivor of the Srebrenica genocide and lived in the region while it was under siege from 1992 through 1995. She lost 99 family members, including her 4 uncles during the genocide. Her mission is to spread the truth and raise awareness about the genocide against Bosniaks, so Bosnian Muslims in Srebrenica, and to fight the denial of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina as a whole. She's currently the president of the Bosniaks Cultural Community, Preporod of North America, and is the author of A Sorrow for Silence and The Darkness of Silver Lights. Sonata, thank you for joining us today, and I would like to pass the mic to you.
Well, thank you so much, all of you who participate in this, and thank you so much for Holocaust Museum, Bosnian American Genocide Institute. Thank you for Srebrenica Memorial Center for doing so much to spread the awareness, to tell the truth, and to fight against the denial of genocide. As you mentioned, I am a war survivor. My story is long, 28 years long, starting from April 1992, probably ending in the end of July of 1992. But I also have to say that maybe until 2013, when last bone was found of my youngest uncle that we buried that year. But as Ida mentioned, I won't be able to say the whole story in only 10 minutes. I will try to do my best. But I wanted to give a little introduction of how my life started changing during the circumstances that we unfortunately got into. I was only 17 years old when war started. I was 10th grade in high school in Vlasenica, where we had our professors coming to teach us in classrooms, wearing camouflage clothing, telling us that they had some kind of army exercises going on, but we had no clue that the war actually started. We had a situation where we were stopped one day with the buses in Milici, and all Bosniaks boys were taken out and beaten up by Serbian boys, while the bus driver watched it and did not dare to do anything about it. So that was the last day when we actually saw each other as classmates. And when I got home, my family was prepared to leave the home, and we escaped as refugees to a village of my uncle, where we stayed for a couple of years. My house was burned down April 12th of 1992 with all of my childhood pictures, so I don't have any memories, and that's very traumatic for a person to not to have something to refer to when you talk to your children. Later on, the war started growing, and people were killed everywhere. So we were refugees in a village called Opetci, and during that occupation from Serbian army, I lost so many family members already, and I would like to say a couple of names that had the worst impact on me at that time. My two best friends actually got killed, Senad Djikanovic, Allah rahmetele, and Asanovich, nickname Fatsa. I talked about him in my book, The Darker Silver Lights, because he was very special to me and he impacted my life in a very good way. Just a little part of our friendship. The last time I saw him, he complained that during the war, he did not have enough clothes to wear, so he needed a hat. So I had to rip off my mom's sweater, and I needed a hat for him at night so he could wear it the next day, because he was protecting our village from enemies. And all of a sudden, the next day in the afternoon, he actually got killed, and the bullet got through his head, and actually through that hat that I needed for him. And that's something that I would never forget. I'm sorry. The war was taking everything from me. First of all, the war took the best years of my life. Instead of enjoying adulthood, I became adult overnight, and my only goal, as goal of all of us, was to basically focus on surviving. So we have to teach ourselves how to survive from all the grenade and all attacks from the Serbian soldiers and their army and bombs. I didn't have time to think about anything else. All of a sudden, things started even getting worse in 1993. Reserves from the food reserves actually started to decrease dramatically, because we were surrounded by Serbian soldiers, and the help couldn't get in. We used the food that we actually had as a reservation, but we got to the point where people started dying from hunger, dying from starvation. Another very bad thing in Srebrenica was that medical help was not even there. We had a war hospital in Srebrenica where we had so many wounded civilians, and the doctors didn't have any medications, any ability to help out. So finally, Srebrenica became proclaimed as a protected zone from United Nations. And as Hassan said a while ago, we all thought that that was the end of the war. So we kind of got a little bit relaxed, and we started getting a little bit of help from the world through humanitarian convoys, and a little bit of food, which made us a little bit feeling a little bit better about the whole situation. We were hoping that one day we will actually get freed from that huge concentration camp that we actually been for those 2 years. But to just add a few more things, even then when Dutch battalion, United Nations battalion came to Srebrenica, to be specific, to Potocari, Serbian continued sending bombs and killing civilians. So the genocide did not happen on July 11th in Srebrenica. Genocide started happening in April, from the beginning of the war in 1992. And I would say that it continued happening, and the most killing happened on July 11th and a few days after that. So when people say genocide of Srebrenica happened on July 11th, I would like to make sure that they know that we lost few thousand people before that in Srebrenica. Actually, people who were killed brutally from Serbian and from Serbians soldiers and their army. So from 1993 to 1995, as I said, we had a little bit of room to think that the things will actually get better, and did not expect what actually happened on that fatal July 11th. July 7th, the pressure and attacks started from Serbian side and from their army, and we did not have any ability to protect ourselves anymore. We thought that United Nations battalions will help us, but obviously something was happening totally different from our expectations. Basically, the Dutch battalion gave up on us. They gave up on their weapons and their transporters, motor vehicles and everything. And they basically handed it to Serbian soldiers as they were attacking more and more and coming closer to downtown of Srebrenica. My mom was really ill. I write about her illness and her situation in my book, The Darker Silver Lights. And when July 11th came, I forgot to tell one more thing, which is very important, and I apologize for that. After Srebrenica was proclaimed as protected enclave and protected zone, we came back. We went back to our burned house. My dad rebuilt one room and we moved back in there, and thinking that we can stay there and the war should be ended. But in the meantime, my mom got shot by sniperists who were basically looking at our house at all the time, and she lost half of her left hand. So including that, she had so many other diseases, including rheumatism, and she couldn't walk much. So when July 11th came, me taking care of her all that time, I wasn't able to manage myself, seeing us getting safely to Potocari, where we were ordered to go. So I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I will never forget that. And when four of us, my dad, my brother, my mom, and I, hugged each other goodbye in front of our house in our village, Žutica. We're getting apart. We had to get apart, and my dad and my brother supposed to be going one, and my mom and I, we are supposed to be going into the different direction. So my dad told me something that I will again never forget, and that reminds me of how parents are always worried about their kids. He handed me his pistol, his gun that he legally had before war, with his name engraved on it. And he told me this. He said, "Daughter, there are only 2 bullets left in this pistol. I want you to kill your mom and yourself if you get into the position to be captured from Chetniks. I don't want you to get raped. I don't want you to let your mom get raped and tortured by them. If you let that happen, I will never forgive you." So he hugged me, and I took a pistol. So that was the last time I saw them, thinking that I will never see them again. My brother and my dad, they left. They went through the forest. They went through the mountains with other men from Srebrenica who were ordered to go the same way. My mom and I, we started kind of walking from our village towards Potocari, but as I said, she was really in a bad condition. She really couldn't walk. But I kind of pushed her. I helped her. I supported her. And she walked few miles, and she was sitting and getting rest every couple of her steps. So people from the villages where we were living, they passed us. They all left, and only the 2 of us left alone in empty villages of Srebrenica. So a few miles later, she finally collapsed, and it was in a village called Brda. She sat next to the cemetery, and she couldn't walk anymore. She couldn't move. And I got lost. I didn't know what to do. I started screaming, crying, but she just couldn't walk anymore. So she said to me, "Daughter, you have to move on. You have to move on. You cannot stay with me. They're gonna come. They're gonna capture you. They're gonna do bad things to you. You really need to keep moving. You gotta leave me here." Of course, as a child, I was not going to do that, and she begged me to do that. She begged me to leave her. I cried, she cried. So she started pushing me away, telling me that she hates me, that she does not want me around. Her life was ended, and I need to continue living. But God knows how hard those moments were, where I was fighting with her to make her move, to make her get up, to continue walking, but she just couldn't. So all of a sudden, something happened again. And by our Bosnian costumes, if a parent swears you into something to do, you really have to. So she unbuttoned her blouse, she took her breasts out, and she said, "I will swear each drop of the milk that I fed you as a baby, if you don't leave me, I will never forgive you if they capture you, if they rape you." So at that moment, I knew that I have to do it. There was no question asked. She also said, "Just keep walking, don't look back. If you once look back, you're gonna come back, but I don't want you here." So I left my mom. I was only 19 years old when I left my mom sitting there waiting to get killed. And I was walking, but I didn't know where I was walking. I didn't know how to get to Potocari. I didn't know where and what directions to take. So when that happened, it was late afternoon. Of course, I didn't have a watch. I was looking at the time by sun rising, sun going down. And I assume it was probably close to 7, 8 at night. I started walking somewhere, and God knows God knows where I was walking, because I walked all night through some kind of forest that I couldn't figure it out where that was, all alone. Nobody was there. I could not find anybody. Everyone already got to Potocari, and my walk from that place where I left my mom to Potocari lasted whole night. So the next morning, I heard people whispering, people talking somewhere. So I figured that I'm close to Potocari. And yes, I was very close to Potocari, getting crazy over leaving my mom. I wasn't myself. Now I know it. I think I lost it for a few hours, because it was not normal situation. It was not something that a person would easily cope with. Of course, me being that young, having that gun in my bag, waiting to kill myself if needed, because my dad ordered that for me. It was not easy. So when I got to Potocari, I saw thousands and thousands of women, children, elderly, a lot of men, wounded men who couldn't take a walk through the forest and mountains. They decided to come to Potocari and ask for UN protection. They thought that they would be safe there. So when I got there, a friend of mine, Vahid Hodzic, saw me. He was a UN translator at that time, and he actually was in Potocari with Dutch battalion people, and he helped me get myself together, and God knows how thankful today I am to him, because he helped me actually realize that I am there, and that the things and horror just started happening, that I have to get myself together and somehow escaped from Potocari. But my heart was telling me something totally different. I let buses getting filled with women and children pass by me. I was just sitting there waiting for something. I was not even sure what I was waiting for, but my heart was telling me that I need to wait for something. So I spent a night in Potocari in the building of battery factory, and that night I saw many men was taken by Serbian soldiers, and one of my classmates, Almir Subasic, who I saw that day, was taken in front of me, and I never saw him ever again. I also write about him in my book. I also, before night, I saw a girl running from the cornfield all in blood, found out later that she was raped by their soldiers, and I found out that she hung herself later on as well. The night at Potocari was a night from horror movies. It's really hard to describe that silence of the night, and then the screams from nowhere. In the morning, we found out that soldiers were torturing the men who were escaped in Potocari to ask for protection from UN. somehow I managed to go through that night. But one lady who was sitting next to me in that big cold building found out that I was carrying my dad's gun, and she wanted to report me to Serbian soldiers. If they found the gun in my bag, they would probably kill me. So I begged her that to stay silent, not to say anything. And I told her that I will throw away the gun so that nobody else will get killed because of my gun on me. So I threw it away in one of the shelters that were in that building, and I got rid of it. So she calmed herself down, but she did not want me close to her. So I found out that all of us being in Potocari, we were, I don't want to be mean or rude, but we were selfish. We were just trying to get through it to save our own lives. That's how it was just set up. So another day passes. I'm seeing people taking away all men, all boys, 10, 11 years old, but we didn't know where they were taking them. Another night came, again alone, with all these women. I refused to get onto the buses. I refused to leave Potocari, but I still wasn't sure why. So the next morning, I am seeing my mom crawling in between people, and she made it. So when I left her by cemetery in the village Brda, she decided to crawl step by step, and she did it for almost 3 days. And she managed to come to Potocari. So when I saw my mom, I have to say that that was the happiest moment of all moments in my life, because I already felt so guilty that I had to leave her. And I was so guilty of me not being a good child because I couldn't help her. And she managed to save her life, and she managed to reunite with me. So immediately I asked people for help, and they did help me to get her onto the bus. We got onto the bus, and we left Potocari. When in the buses driving, still not knowing where we were going, some people were saying we are going to Bratunac to get killed on the stadium. Some people were saying that we are going to Vlasenica to get killed there. Some people were saying we were going to Nova Kasaba. There was a huge school stadium where they are planning to kill us all. So we had no clue. Very rarely people would say that we are going to get transported to the free zone, to territory where army of Bosnia and Herzegovina was controlling. So we were in the buses without knowledge of what's gonna happen with us, but I was able to sneak and peek through the windows while driving, and I saw so many captured Bosniaks, recognized many of them with their hands above their heads, so many killed, thousands and thousands of them in Kasaba, Konjević Polje, and Vlasenica, close to Tišća. So many got killed, and their bodies were thrown on the roads cross, and it was just like that I am in some kind of horror movie. Our bus was stopped few times by Serbian soldiers. They got in, they asked for money, they asked for gold if we had any. Women would you know, hand them whatever they had. But my mom and I, we just didn't have anything, and they didn't do much harm in our bus. They would leave, but they did scare us a lot. And also, I wanted to explain how emotions can get screwed, to say that, you know, that way. You get to the point where you cannot face fear anymore. In my situation, the fear that I had for through all these years just disappeared. I became numb. I did not feel anything. So I knew there was only two options for all of us. Either we're gonna survive somehow, or we're gonna get killed. There was no third option. And I kind of made agreement with my emotions, and that got me through the whole point of this trip from Potocari through the free zone. Finally, we got there while we're kicked out from the buses, and we started walking. Of course, my mom had trouble walking again. Women and children with their little stuff that they had were in groups with us. So we finally reached to the free zone, and we recognized our soldiers waiting for us. So that's basically the end of that part of my story. But as I said, my story is 28 years long, and it's impossible to tell all. But the good thing is my father and my brother managed to survive. We reunited with my brother six days after July 11th. We reunited with my dad 21 days after. And but unfortunately, I lost 99 family members. I lost 4 uncles, as I mentioned earlier. The last bone that and only bone that we could find from my youngest uncle of his remains were buried in 2013. The end of the story will never happen. So we continue living in Tuzla. I continued my education, but tragic that happened through this genocide in Srebrenica was something that marked my life and all lives of Srebrenica survivors is something that will hurt forever.
Senada, thank you so much for that story. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for folks to ask you some questions. It's incredibly painful to hear that you went through that, and I'm sure for many of the folks who are listening and viewing that that was pretty jarring to just put themselves in your shoes. We're going to move on to Mr. Ron Haviv, and David will provide that intro next.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Senada and Ida. Thanks to Senada for reminding us that the genocide did not start on July 11th, 1995, but there was a siege of civilians in progress from 1992 to 1995. People were being starved and bombed and victimized by snipers. And Hassan Asanovich has called this the first phase of the genocide. So it's my honor now to introduce Ron Haviv, who's an Emmy-nominated award-winning photojournalist and co-founder of the photo agency 7, who's been dedicated to documenting conflict and raising awareness about human rights around the globe. In the last 3 decades, he's covered more than 25 conflicts and worked in over 100 countries and published critically acclaimed collections of photography. His first photography book, Blood and Honey, a Balkan War Journal, was called one of the best nonfiction books of the year by the Los Angeles Times, and a chilling but vastly important record of a people's suffering by Newsweek. His work in the Balkans was used as evidence to indict and convict war criminals at the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague. So we are grateful, I would say, although shaken to the core, but grateful for his documentation of the truth of the earliest stages of the genocide when Serb forces invaded Bijeljina in northeast Bosnia early in April 1992. So his work, as well as Roy Gutmann's reporting in northwest Bosnia, has been crucial for our full understanding of the scope of the Serb aggression and genocide from its earliest stages. So,
great. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a great honor to be part of this conversation. 25, I was on the outskirts of Srebrenica, trying to understand what was happening. And sadly, as we all know, the truth was more horrible than anything we could possibly imagine. And one of the questions, of course, was how could it have reached such a point? The brutality that existed in Srebrenica, and it didn't just sort of come up out of nowhere. And as somebody that basically had started my documentation of the dissolution of Yugoslavia, starting with the war in Slovenia, into the war in Croatia, documenting the fall of Vukovar, and the beginning of ethnic cleansing in Bijeljina, you start to understand how things continuously got worse and more serious, more severe, and more dangerous. And so when we look here at, this is a Macedonian Albanian man named Harush Zubiri begging for his life during the first battle in Bosnia in the town Bijeljina that David just referred to. Harush was essentially the first prisoner in the war in Bosnia. He was later killed after this photograph was taken, and his body was eventually found in a mass grave about 12 years later. Just before this photograph was taken, you see here members of Arkon's Tigers, a notorious Serbian paramilitary group, just shot 3 Muslim civilians. That's Abdullah Rahman and his wife Beshtula, and Asya Tifa Srabanitsa, and they are among the first victims of what was later became known as ethnic cleansing. And so as I as I followed the story from there, I was in Sarajevo during the peace march when Serbian militia opened fire on the peace march, and there for the siege of Sarajevo, and one of the first photographers into the prison camps of Manjača and Ternopili, and so on as we, myself and Roy and others, would cover and document and tell the world what was happening. It was quite amazing that it would continue to be relatively ignored by the world. It would kind of go up and down. Obviously, there was some help from the United Nations in Sarajevo and so on, but nothing that was enabling anybody to be able to end the war, or for many people even survive the war. So it really was in '93 when they named the safe havens of Srebrenica, Žepa, Goražde. People thought that the world community was becoming a little bit more involved and was putting their reputation on the line to protect the people. So by the summer of 1995, when there were rumors abounding that the Serb forces were moving towards Srebrenica, that nobody knew exactly what was going to happen, and as myself and other journalists sort of arrived on the outskirts of Srebrenica between Free Territory and Serbian territory, trying to determine what was happening, we started to witness the survivors coming across. And in this image, you see there's a group of women. They've just arrived in Tuzla, which was a UN base, which quickly became a displacement camp. And at times there was this sort of eerie silence. And I walked up to this group of women who were just sitting there, and I asked, because you could tell that it's mostly women, some young men, and one older man. I said, where are the men? And as that question was translated, the entire group of women broke down, hysterical, screaming, as they each had one of their own stories to tell of what they knew or didn't know of their brothers, of their fathers, of their sons, and so on. And it became immediately apparent that even though the UN was there, they were obviously doing very little. Obviously, as we learned more, they had done very little in Srebrenica to protect the people, but there was even less that they could do in Tuzla in their own camp. And it became more and more, as more and more people arrived by foot, by truck, this incredible story of the failure of the world community. Now, in kind of world geopolitics, this is, of course, following the genocide in Rwanda the year before. And so it was remarkable that once again, we were looking at a failed operation, a failed commitment, a failed promise by the world community to protect those that had very little ability to protect themselves. And it became incredibly painful to document this. Of course, nothing like, of course, what the people themselves were experiencing, but this just amazing failure was something that I think galvanized journalism around the world to keep pushing what had happened to these people, to tell their stories, to show their images, to, most importantly, to change the idea of what was a statistic, a number. While we didn't, of course, know the number of dead, we knew thousands of people were arriving. And often when you get into those situations, it is up to the journalists, it is up to the photographers to make sure that the numbers are turned into real life stories, like we referred to earlier in the conversation today, that these were real people with real dreams, real emotions, not just a number. And the frustration was, palpable by the people, that they could not believe that they had been in this safe area, that they had been promised protection by the French General Morillon and by Kofi Annan and by President Clinton and John Major and Tony Blair and all these other people. And when it came down to it, there was no protection. Here we see this woman, Nadziba Sahilovic. She had just arrived. She had lost her son and her husband, and she's screaming out of frustration at this Swedish UN soldier. And due to the advent of social media and digital, I was able to find both the soldier and Nadziba over the years and get their stories. And his story was the soldier story was one of great shame and frustration, that he felt that they were not able to do enough to help the people. Nadziba became one of the mothers of Srebrenica, and her life became dedicated into getting justice, trying to find the remains of her lost relatives. So the scenes just became over and over again. There were a few people that came with some weapons, but when we saw what they were fighting against on the Serb side, there of course was no way that they could have defended this area. And it just was hour after hour, day after day, of people arriving, surviving, trying to find out what happened to their loved ones, trying to reunite with people that they lost in the woods, that they lost in Potocari, that they lost on the way to safety. And slowly they got organized and created lists of survivors and those that had died, that people could kind of find out what had happened. But it was one tragic story after another. And of course, this is just the beginning, as we were starting to learn exactly what was happening here. And so eventually, as things changed, as the displaced people were moved to Tuzla and other places, there was, of course, the question of what happened. Were there survivors? Or if there were no survivors, what happened to them? And the stories started to come out from those that were in the woods, stories of being attacked, the stories of psychedelic drugs being used to cause confusion, smoke, all of these different things. And so myself and my colleagues would venture into the woods and we would find these pieces. And these are not pieces from the mass graves. These are the things that just were left of those that didn't survive in the woods that we just heard about. And then eventually the mass graves started to be found. And that became the story that began the numbers and trying to find out how many victims there were. And forensic experts from around the world would come in and they would be determining who died where, with people from Srebrenica or from other places. And of course, Bosnia, unfortunately, was a land of these mass graves. In conjunction with the forensic experts, the International Committee for Missing Persons was formed using DNA. They established a very robust system where they were able to identify a bone belonged to this person or that person. They established new procedures that are now, in some sort of silver lining, now used all over the world and were really well established because of Srebrenica, and they were able to now use ICMP, the acronym, is now opening up offices in other places, and they're being used to identify people. And then quickly they started this memorial, this idea of recognizing those that were lost, this idea to give closure to the families. So each summer, obviously now, July 11th, this week, there are ceremonies where they would bury, usually not the whole person, but whatever they could find of that person to give comfort and closure to the family. And it's an incredibly emotional thing, of which I'll show a very short film after this about that. And so kind of following the story here, you see once again, this is Nedziva on the right, and then this is when General Mladic was convicted, and I run into her here again, and you see her 20 some odd years later. She is still mourning the loss, and this was one, not the whole thing, I'm sure. I mean, she was pleased with the verdict, but it didn't give her the closure that she expected. But still, for her and the other mothers of Srebrenica and so on, to at least see some justice with the conviction of General Mladic, the conviction of Radovan Karadzic, that at least there was some closure in that way. And so Srebrenica became this very important moment, not only in Bosnian history, but in the world. And so on July 11th, the Seven Foundation, which I established with Gary Knight, we're opening an installation in Potocari with some of this work that you just saw, as well as video that has never been seen before from Srebrenica. And I'll just read you something quickly that I put up that'll be in the walls in Srebrenica. The trauma that was born that week in July 1995 has never faded. As time passed from the displaced to finding the remains of the victims in the woods, to the discovery of the mass graves, culminating the establishment of the memorial center and all that it entails, Srebrenica has become the touchstone. What happened was eventually declared a genocide, defining a generation of mothers who mourn and resulting in some satisfaction with convictions of politicians and military leaders. And this last photograph, which is also an installation in Srebrenica, is from a family who fled their home. Their home was taken over by Serbs, and when they got back to their home, this was all that was left. So some of the images that you just saw and will be in Potocari should remain a permanent reminder of what can happen when we stand by and watch, when we think it doesn't have impact on us, and what our responsibility is to defend those who can't defend themselves. So David, if you would play the short film now, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
David, are you able to play the film?
I don't have the video.
Okay, well then, never mind. I thought you guys had the video. That was the idea. It's no problem. You can send the link to people later. That's fine.
Someone has it.
We can send it in our thank you email for everybody that is attending that can watch it. And we also should have it online as well. So please, we will definitely get it out to everybody.
Thank you, Ron. We appreciate you participating definitely in this important conversation. I would like to introduce Mr. Roy Gutmann next, a Pulitzer Prize winning foreign correspondent. Roy Gutmann brings 4 decades of experience reporting on war crimes, and Middle East affairs at some of the world's most prestigious publications. Roy has spent decades shedding light on the most brutal aspects of war, indelibly shaping the public record towards greater truth and justice. Gutmann spent 5 years reporting on the Middle East for McClatchy as Baghdad Bureau Chief and as the Middle East Bureau Chief based in Istanbul. Previously, his reporting on ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Herzegovina, including the first documented accounts of Srebrenica concentration camps, won the 1993 Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting, the George Polk Award for Foreign Reporting, and the Selden Ring Award for Investigative Reporting. Gutmann shared the George Polk Award for Foreign Reporting in 2013 with McClatchy colleagues for chronicling the complexities of civil war in Syria. And Roy Gottman is the author of Banana Diplomacy and A Witness to Genocide. He also co-edited Crimes of War, What the Public Should Know. Gutmann holds a bachelor's degree in history from Haverford College and a master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics. Mr. Gutmann, would you like to join the conversation?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. Technical difficulties are always happening. First of all, I've got to say that thank you so much, Ida and David, and thank you for letting me speak today. I was so moved by Ron's presentation and by Sonata. I can't tell you how they have brought back the memories of the time, but I think also for the general public, really explained things and given a feel for events that could not be better done. It is. I want to draw back a little bit and try to give a little bit of overview. Try to put a bit of historical perspective, if I can, on Srebrenica, and bring things a little bit up to date, having covered the war in Syria now for a good 6 years, including several trips in, but never spending as long in Syria as I spent in Bosnia. It's now 25 years after Srebrenica, and it seems to me this is the right time to ask the question, did we learn the lessons? Did we learn the right lessons? It's one thing to say, and we should be saying, I hope and I'm sure this is why the museum is holding this, this event, that there should be no more Srebrenicas. But what are we doing to ensure that? For those who are not that familiar with the history of the Bosnia War, please understand, Srebrenica was the culmination of the crimes against humanity in the Bosnia War. It occurred 3 years into the war. But right from the start of the war, there was an assault on the Bosnian Muslims by Bosnian Serbs and by the Serbian military. That really also constituted a genocide. There were concentration camps. There was systematic rape. There was the destruction of the culture. There were mass deportations. I reached the conclusion, and it came a year or two after the event, because I had no distance, certainly when I was covering it, that Bosnia was a war crime in the masquerade, masquerading as a war. It was not really a war. It was only all war crimes. If you go fast forward to today, a quarter century later, what I said about Bosnia can be said of Syria today. It is a war crime masquerading as a war. Syria has now had a war for 9 years. Bosnia lasted 3.5 years. The Syrian regime since 2013 has been routinely dropping barrel bombs, huge barrels full of shrapnel, basically, thrown out of a helicopter that are designed to kill civilians and destroy their homes. Some 700,000 Syrians have died in this war, and 6 million people have, which is far more than the population of Bosnia, have fled their homes as refugees or have been displaced internally. So this is crimes against humanity on a much more massive scale than Bosnia. So in that broad sense, when you look at it in terms of the history of the last 25 years, I'm sorry to say we have not learned the lesson of Bosnia. We have not learned the lesson of Srebrenica. Well, then there's a question, well, what did we learn in the last quarter century? And what did we not learn? I want to say that I personally learned a great deal that I'm still trying to digest. And I'm going to show some pictures just to explain what caused me to have this learning curve and what caused me to reach some conclusions. One thing I learned in Bosnia, and this is not to pat any journalist on the back, but it is that the media can arouse public attention. Here is the first. I'm not sure. Tell me if you can see it, because I've got too much here on my screen. This is a picture here of the first major cover story I did in Newsday in 1992 at the start of the war. It's about a trainload of people who were deported from their hometown along the Drina River and put into buses and then put into a train, and then they were sent to the Hungarian border, but they didn't have their papers, and so they were turned back. And then at this station in the Vojvodina in the north of Serbia, they were disembarking, and there was a passport factory set up there so that the Serb authorities could deport these people to another country. Nobody in Europe would accept them if they didn't have passports, so they were, producing passports for them. So this I'm so
sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind sharing your screen? There's a share screen button at the bottom of the Zoom.
I thought I had it, but. So you cannot see this picture?
Not
I can pull it up if you'd like me to.
Yeah, maybe it's easier.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
So that does not come up then.
Now it's visible, and it's the Newsday photo.
Right. Okay, so let me just go on. Anyway, so this was a cover story that actually combined elements that I then decided were going to be the essence of my reporting from that point on. There was an event. They were traveling on the state railways. It was very important for me to associate the state with the with the deportation. You had real people who were in this train. I photographed them. This was my own amateur photography. And then I told the story of how they were deported from their hometown. And it was basically a tank point. They were ordered out of their homes and to get into buses, and then they were put on the screen. So what is so interesting about this is that this was going on all the time and nobody had noticed it. And nobody was reporting about it. And I went up there and I could not believe my eyes. I could not grasp that that the state was deporting people on its state railways to other countries en masse for nothing except for the fact that they wanted to get rid of them. And the story impressed my editors. I don't know if it changed anybody's minds in the general public, but it sure got my editors' interest. And that in journalism is very important. But it really did tell a story. You might reasonably ask, how did I get to even write this story? How did I get to this point in northern Serbia on that day? Well, I heard a tip from a journalist friend in Belgrade, which is the capital of Serbia, that trainloads of refugees were arriving in northern Serbia routinely. And then they were being deported to Austria and to other countries, and to Hungary and to other countries. I was working at the time for Newsday, which is a New York newspaper, a New York suburban newspaper in Long Island. And I was the European correspondent, and I'd been there since 1989. I knew the old Yugoslavia, this multinational country, having been assigned there 15 years earlier for the news agency for Reuters. I knew the language. I had colleagues from even the old days. I had covered wars before, but I had to find my compass before I could actually, pin the tail on the donkey, describe the event for what it was, say who was doing what to whom. And that took months of observing the events that preceded the war in Bosnia to determine what was going on. The country then, known as Yugoslavia, was created after World War I. And it was, in the ruins of the Turkish, the Ottoman Empire and the Austrian, Hungarian Empire. And now it was breaking up after the end of communism. Two wars preceded the war in Bosnia, one in Slovenia, one in Croatia. And the one in Croatia went on and on and on and on, starting in June 1991. And it took me months to determine exactly what kind of war was that. Was it a civil war? Was it just a spontaneous war? And eventually I reached the conclusion it was a war of aggression. And it was a war of Serbian aggression. In that, as the country was breaking up, they decided they were going to take as many pieces where there were Serbs, ethnic Serbs living, and as many parts of the rest of the country as they could, and build a greater Serbia. The war in Bosnia began the following year, in March of 1992. And this too was clearly a war of aggression. In other words, it was to take territory. I determined after covering the war in Croatia that you have to do the stories, and I had to do the stories if I was going to explain this very complex thing to the public. The stories that showed governments involved in mistreating human beings and mistreating civilians. And I went after the stories that showed that the Serbian government specifically was involved. When I started covering Bosnia, I used the same principle. And that was that to show the direct links between the atrocities that I was covering on the ground and the Bosnian Serb authorities who were causing them. And this meant tracing things back. This meant looking for all the clues of government's involvement. This meant going to the authorities who I was personally holding responsible in my reporting at least, and asking them for their comment and asking them for their explanation. And that went into every story. I spent my time reporting in the provinces, especially the city of Banja Luka in northern Bosnia, which was a predominantly Serb city. I stayed with the story until from the beginning, well, really from the first day to the end. I was, professionally, I was very lucky actually to be working for Newsday at that point. It's a newspaper that in its day really had renown for doing investigative work on Long Island. I had smart editors who always asked me tough questions, but who also knew, once they got the questions answered, how to display the stories I did convincingly and appropriately. They backed me as I covered the crimes. And you can tell from the pictures I'm about to show you that I had a great photographer. If we could go to picture number 2. So this is I think it's a black and white shot. I can't see it on my screen here. Of the town of Manjača, which was a camp where men were taken from the town of Banja Luka, in fact, and from other towns in the region, who had done nothing, but they were a threat to the Serbs in that they were men, and they might gather and they might want to defend their town as their rights are being taken away and as their people are being taken away. And here they are in Manjača lining up to have their hair cut as if they were sheep. And you can just see the degradation in that picture. Now this is a picture by my photographer at the time, Andrei Kaiser, who was born actually in what was then, or what was a short time earlier, East Germany, who spent time in an East German jail, who had seen the kind of thugs who became the guards at places like Manjača in the jail he had been held in, and who knew, and it took him maybe like an hour before he got them to be looking the other way, and then he shot 2 or 3 pictures of this scene, which is, to me, is eponymous for what the Serbs were doing to the people of northern Bosnia. This was not the worst of the camps. This was maybe one of the best of the camps. In fact, the Serb authorities, I asked to go to Omarska when I went to the town of Banja Luka, and I was really one of the first reporters, if not the very first, who went there in the middle of, it was about June, July of 1992. I asked to go to Omarska because I'd heard that the worst things about it, and they wouldn't take me. But they said, they'll take you to Manjača, you can interview people, and you can look around and see that we're treating people well. So this is the place, this is their model camp, in fact. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is actually how the paper displayed the picture and the story. I thought, frankly, it deserved to be a cover, but then again, the reporter doesn't determine how things are played and what editors do with it. But this picture went around the world, and it really got. It was one of the first scenes from inside the camps in Bosnia. And now to go to the next picture, the setting up of detention camps where men were taken, starved, and killed. And tortured before killing was an example of a government-directed crime. You could say a war crime, no question, because these are civilians, but also a crime against humanity because it was done in a huge and a systematic way, and there were camps all over the Bosnian Serb-controlled parts of Bosnia. I wanted to go to Omarska, as I said. They wouldn't take me. I decided I had to find a way to report this story, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was going crazy because I was convinced from seeing Manjača, which was a pretty bad place, that Omarska must be 5 times worse, and how am I going to report it? Well, I did something that I think comes out of the World War II notebooks of journalists at the time who never got to the Nazi camps. I assumed that somebody might have escaped. Somebody might have been released. And I've got to find those people, and I'm going to have to tell the story through refugees. So I spent weeks in Zagreb, Croatia, which is the next country and the next place, and where there was a huge number, there were hundreds of thousands of Bosnians fleeing Bosnia. And with the help of an NGO, a Bosnian NGO, I found two witnesses, one of whom at the top, a man called himself Meho, who said he had been in Omarska, and the other one, Alija Lujinovic, who said that he had been in a place called Brčko Luka, on the river, on the Sava River. And I got their story. And on the basis of those two testimonies, I did this story. And this is a case where investigative reporting only works if you have tough editors who challenge every word and make you prove it, make you go out and talk to everybody on earth, including, you know, the US Embassy, the International Red Cross, the UN High Commission for Refugees. And then finally, I tried to reach Radovan Karadzic himself, but I didn't get him. But I think I got Milan Panic, who was then the sort of titular president of Serbia, to comment. So this story revealed that there was not only one camp where men were being taken and executed or tortured to death regularly, but that there was a string of them. And I have one person from each of two camps. This is a story that made a difference. It sent a shockwave around the world. Nobody knew that this was going on. No government revealed it. And here is a journalist doing it. And you know, you go out on quite a limb when you're the only person out there reporting something. But it led to a UN. But it was true. You know, the facts were the facts, and my witnesses actually were telling what they saw, what they experienced, and. There was pressure, it built up, there was a UN debate, there was pressure from the great powers, and starting with the United States, and the Bosnian Serbs closed down the camps, the whole string of them. It did not all right away, but within a matter of weeks or a month or more. Thousands of lives were saved. So this story, as you can see from my description, really made a difference. Let's go to the third slide. The next slide. And this is a story that also made a difference. It was something I've never done before. I had never covered rape stories. I'd covered the police as a cub reporter, but I'd never covered rape, and certainly not massive rape and not systematic rape. And I couldn't have imagined of asking anybody to pose for a photograph so that I could put that on page one of my newspaper. But in this case, it was a group of women. There were about 30 of them or so. I'd heard about this from a religious, from an imam, the mufti of Bosnia, in fact, or maybe northern Bosnia, was living in, or was operating out of Zagreb. And I met him. And that's where I heard about the story. And it meant about a 4-day drive through hostile territory to Tuzla, and then searching these women out in Tuzla, which wasn't so hard, but getting the authorities there, the police and health authorities to agree. And then I went out and interviewed them in school. And let's go to the next picture, please. Well, they told their story. We sat down. My photographer just sort of melted into the woodwork. He did his damnedest not to be intrusive. And after they told their stories, I had them stand together. They were in tears, and my photographer was in tears, Andre. Everybody was in tears except for me, because I was just angry. Their story was just shocking. They had been taken basically in buses from their homes on the Sava River, and taken to schools or factories, and then they were each one of them was raped, sometimes multiple times, and it was done in a horrible, systematic way. As I say, I've never thought of having a picture like this in a newspaper. But I told them, you know, if I don't have your picture, if we don't have some evidence of it, nobody will believe the story. Nobody will believe that this happened. And this story also had an effect, as I say, because it shocked the conscience of many, many people. Governments demanded investigations. It added to the support among the countries at the UN to have an international tribunal to try the war crimes. And the Yugoslavia tribunal was set up. This is at the end of 1992, but sorry, August of 1992. And the tribunal was really set up in a cursory form in the beginning of the next year. As I say, I learned out of this experience that journalism really can make a difference. But I learned other things as well. I learned that there are good people in government, in the US government, believe it or not, in politics, in US politics, and in public life. But they have to be energized if they're going to act. And they will not act unless there's really a strong cause. The facts that we present as reporters can be that cause. The images, such as Ron's, certainly can promote an event, or can put an event into everybody's consciousness, in a sense that they will have sleepless nights if they do nothing about it. And that goes for the photographs that my photographer took as well, Andre. I learned that members of Congress can play a vital role, especially if they get the bit between their teeth and just decide that they are not going to give up and they're going to make a speech every day until people take notice. I mean, people like Bob Dole made a huge difference in getting attention of the Clinton administration. NGOs play a vital role. This museum and the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, well, they didn't exist at the time that this was going on. But they do now, and they make a difference. And today's event is evidence. What else have we learned? Well, in the interim, tribunals are a positive thing on the international scene, but they are no substitute for stopping a genocide when it is happening. And they also can get things wrong, or partially wrong. The Hague Tribunal was correct in determining that that what happened in Srebrenica was a genocide. It was a mass killing with the intention of wiping out the whole population or preventing their procreation. But actually, the events early in the war were also a genocide. The ethnic cleansing of the cities, the setting up of the concentration camps, the killing of prisoners in the camps, the destruction of the culture. And prosecutors continually pressed the Hague judges with that charge. But the court, which for years only was able to get, they had to rely on the international community, on American and other forces to arrest suspected war criminals. And the US especially was reluctant to do it. The British were a little bit bolder. Anyway, they didn't even, so we're talking these events of 1992, they didn't get Radovan Karadzic, the Bosnian Serb political leader, until 2008. And Ratko Mladic, the military commander, until 2011. That said, tribunals serve many purposes. They can bring closure for many of the victims. They establish the facts of what really happened. They can draw the moral lessons that we should be learning from the events. But the upshot of my education in covering this story about the way the world works is this: to prevent another genocide, states must act. It is a matter of political will. They don't have to send in the 82nd Airborne. They don't just send in their own troops, but they have to use every tool and every trick in the toolbox, short of intervention, direct intervention, if they want to try to stop it. And my take is also that exposing things in real time with lots of details and human testimony and pictures if possible, is one of those things that can embarrass a country that's in the midst of carrying out a genocide into at least slowing it. And that certainly is proven by the fact that the Serbs opened up the camps after the story I did, and after, not just my story, but there was also some spectacular coverage by Channel 4, the British TV network, a few days after the story I did. That's what we learned. So what are the things we failed to learn? Well, you know, one thing is that I'm convinced, and I think most of you probably are, that facts matter. Facts are the answer to the propaganda of a criminal regime. But denial is always lurking in the wings. I just have to mention to you, you know, give me an example of the denial. Well, the Swedish Academy in December, a pretty lofty body, awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature to an author named Peter Handke. He's an Austrian author, and he is a Srebrenica genocide denier. He has written book after book in which he mocks the events in Bosnia. He never went to the trouble of finding out the facts. He just stayed on the Serb side of the river, or he actually went to Srebrenica once, but he basically pretends that this never happened. And the other lesson is that I think has not been learned is that silence by governments in the face of crime facilitates and encourages further crime. This has happened in Croatia and Bosnia, and it's now happening still in Syria. I've learned that our focus as journalists, and I'm convinced of this, covering war should be on the people. Too often news reporting is about the bang bang, you know, the pictures, the smoking guns, the smoking cannon. But this is why. If innocent civilians are targeted, it is a war crime. If a government is committing war crimes, it should be exposed. Our focus that's our focus as journalists. I think our focus on as citizens should also be on what happens to the people in war, to the civilians. People need protection. They need by somebody else, by their own government, or they need the weapons to protect themselves. In Bosnia, the United States for much too long supported a UN arms embargo that allowed the Bosnian Serbs to devastate Sarajevo and other cities in plain view. In Syria, both the Obama and the Trump administrations have looked on as the cities were being barrel bombed, as people were being forced out, as people were being killed in plain view and executed. And on the whole, we've ignored the plight of the civilians. Massive, rampant violation of the rules of war, and that's what war crimes are, is a signal that genocide is coming. So this is the lesson that we haven't learned, but we have to, which is stop it early. The deportations and the expulsions give the clue. Let me go to the next picture, please.
I'm so sorry, Roy. I have to interrupt you, but we have a hard cutoff in 8 minutes. Okay. Would you be able to just provide like a brief conclusion so we would love for folks to be able to ask just a few questions.
Sure. The conclusion I draw here is that we're now seeing a resurgence of war crimes rather than the end of them. We're seeing impunity. Why is this happening? Well, I think it's probably because we live in an age of terror. The United States, rather than observing the rules, rather than insisting that everybody observe the rules, is now letting them fall by the wayside. Guantanamo is an example of a violation, actually, of international humanitarian law. And the current administration, the Trump administration, it doesn't even want to put Americans on trial, or it doesn't want them to serve a sentence if they commit a war crime. The bad actors out there are watching, and they see if the United States strays from upholding the rule of law, it gives them license to do the same. They can innovate. They now keep journalists out. That's what the Assad regime has done in Syria. So we have not been able to cover, in fact, the events there like we did. and they claim terror, that they're fighting terrorists, when in fact they're fighting their own citizens. But they use that terror shibboleth in order to discourage the United States from doing what it should do. So here on the 25th anniversary, I have to say, I hate to say it, but we have a long way to go before we can say no, never again. I don't know whether the next president will get it right, but maybe the president plus one will. And we should keep our eye on this, on trying to improve American policy so that there will indeed be no video. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roy. David, I would love for you to take away the question section. We have a very quick, fast few minutes.
Thank you very much, Roy and Ida. We're running out of time, and I wanted to try to invite Ahmad Begic and Asanovich, who are with us live, so they can say hello and also answer maybe a question we have time for, which would be, how we resolve to continue to remember the victims and to resist the escalation of genocide denial. But hello, Amra.
Hello, Professor. Okay, I will just, Hassan and me, we were sitting next to each other, so the problem is with the tone. Yeah, okay.
So we have about
the location now. Yeah, is it better like this?
So you and Hassan could answer together or one at a time?
One at a time.
Yeah, okay. Who would like to go first? But
I can go first if you want.
Thank you for your participation. It's great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you for organizing this very important event tonight, and thank you for remembering Srebrenica genocide.
So we were going to try to end with a question about the plans for continuing to remember the victims and to resist the escalation of genocide denial.
So the Srebrenica Genocide Memorial a couple of months ago issued its own report on denial, where we've identified governments, organizations and individuals who have been working tirelessly to deny this genocide. So we've identified them. And on the other hand, we do our best to document the stories, to collect personal things from the families, to connect globally, and to work with our partners to make sure that this genocide is not forgotten, that the issues of hatred, issues of denial, and other important issues are confronted. And thank you so much for tonight's event. It contributes to all the issues that we are raising these days, that people need to be educated about.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Perhaps I can direct the same question to Amra, and then we'll have to bring our program to a close.
Yeah, I don't know what to say after Hassan. I would just say that we would not be able to do anything by our own. So this is very important evening for all of us, evening in Bosnia. Thank you for this, what you did for us. We all hope that you will stay with us also in the future, because the feeling in this moment in Srebrenica is like the battle is just starting when we are talking about genocide denial. I don't know if you followed the news from Srebrenica last days, but if you walked through the Srebrenica like 10 days ago, you would see the poster invitation to come to celebrate July 11th, on 6 o'clock, day after tomorrow. They're going to celebrate that. And on the poster, it is written, "Thank you to the military forces of the Bosnian Serbs army." In my very short video, I tried to explain that. I tried to explain that it is really hard for all of us. We lost our family members. for those that they didn't know, my father, my grandpa, my 26 cousins, and my best friend were killed in July 1995. So it is also hard to explain to our own kids, to the new generation, what was happening around. So the feeling is like every year they go step further. So we have to give our best to try to stop it. But we can't be sure that we will make it.
Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing every day at the Memorial Center. And I'm going to ask Ida to bring our commemoration to a close.
Thank you again to the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Jessica and the education team, thank you for putting this together. Amra, Hassan, Sanada, Roy and Ron, and of course, Dr. David Pettigrew for helping put this on today. We must continue to speak the truth. It is the only way to mourn those who have passed and prevent this from happening in the future. And we will be providing resources in the follow-up email for how you can learn more and get involved. And thank you again.
Yes, and I just want to add that we will follow up with Ron Haviv's video, give you some suggestions for books and a survey for you to take after the program. So please look at our events page. We have more coming up next week. So I want to thank everybody for being here, all the panelists, Ida and David for moderating. It was great. It's such an important and powerful event and program. So thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you.